No voy a intentar esta sesión en castellano. I'm not that good yet. So I'm going to start in English. And I want to talk with you about trust, agency, and connection in an age of AI. But first, I want to take you back to 1964, to the AI lab at MIT, where Professor Joseph Weizenbaum and his colleagues were creating the first natural language processing program called ELIZA. And he wanted to create a system that could highlight the superficiality, the shallowness of interaction between humans and machines. And so he created a pattern matching program where ELIZA would ask a question and the user would put in an answer. So here are some screenshots from a documentary from the time. ELIZA would say, "Hi, I'm ELIZA, please tell me your problem." And as the user, you might say, "I'm feeling depressed." Okay. So then ELIZA would use that snippet, that phrase, and say, "Okay, how long have you been feeling depressed?" And you would answer. And this carries on. And what was curious was that even though the secretary had seen the whole progression of them developing this program, she'd tested it, and she got so attached to the experience that she requested to have private time alone with the program. So why was it that she was so persuasive? What was going on with ELIZA? Well, she was mirroring the language that we use to describe our states, our problems, and she was creating a context in which the user could project interiority, meaning, understanding, sentience into the interaction. And this has now since become known as the ELIZA effect. Now, what's curious is that in reality, something quite unusual is happening, but we should have been able to predict it. Given that AI has a lot of definitions, I thought it would be good to start with one that we can use as a starting point. And this is a definition offered by IBM. They say that AI is technology that enables computers, machines, robots to simulate, to perform, to fake human learning, comprehension, problem-solving, decision-making, creativity, and autonomy. But the tricky thing here is the simulation. And often the simulation is very convincing. And the reason it's convincing is because the performance of understanding and creativity and empathy means that we then project autonomy and agency onto that machine. And the reason for this is because we have evolved to put ourselves in other people's shoes, to try and understand the positions of those around us. It helps because in tribes, if you could do that, you would have better relationships and your survival rate would be higher. And so we've evolved to share each other's feelings by imagining what it's like to be in their situation. So projecting us into the feet, the shoes, the life, the mind of others. Now, the reason this works is because of empathy. And we all know the word empathy, but did you know there are actually 3 distinct structural kinds? In order to show you what these are, I'm going to give you a few examples. Raise your hand if you watched Ex Machina. Quite a few of you. Okay. So this is a great example of cognitive empathy. The key protagonist, one of various intelligent robots that's created, is able to put herself in the mind of her designers, her creators, to be able to orchestrate an escape. So she's been able to take a perspective, to fantasize and transpose herself in the shoes of her captors, if you like, to be able to then get her way out of her cage, her prison. The second kind of empathy is a different kind, and I want to show you this video. You may have seen it on TikTok already. Take a look at this. pobrecito Chucho. So my pareja is from Costa Rica, and we often get a lot of these sorts of videos on our feed. And Chucho is probably, 4 years old. I don't know if he's ever fallen in love and had a heartbreak and is singing to his love, "Wake up, don't die." Tiene como 4 años. And yet he's there, and you can feel the feelings. Like, I cry when I see this. And so this is emotional empathy. It's what arises in us when we see a video like this. And I use this example in Norway, in Sweden, in England, so people who don't know what he's singing still feel that feeling, that empathy. Now, how many of you, raise your hand if you watched The Creator? Anyone watch the... Okay, quite a few, not that many. I highly recommend it. In the film, these futuristic AI beings are essentially Zen monks, so they're occupying a moral ground, and this small child has the inability to hurt humans. She's compassionate and she feels, and because she's able to empathize with emotions, she's a really rare person or being that the Americans try to then kill. It's very worth a watch. So this is emotional empathy, being able to identify with ease, unconsciously sometimes, another person's feeling state. The third kind of empathy, which AI cannot replicate, is this, and I am sorry in advance for putting you through this clip. Oh. Oh. Now, apart from the fact that you don't see any women in any of those videos, either they're doing it and they manage not to get caught on camera, or men take more risks. But in every one of those shots, you get some physical feeling of what the pain is going to be in your body, right? There's a somatic physical empathy because of our mirror neurons that fire when we see other people getting hurt. And so this is something that was played on in Westworld. Hands up if you saw Westworld, yeah? Where there is physical empathy, which is one of the key storylines. And so that's the third kind, it's somatic, so the physical response from the mirror neurons in our body that ping off and activate when we see people physically get hurt or have pleasure. Now, humans, in most cases, we experience all of them, and we're evolved to experience all kinds. Of course, AI doesn't actually experience these. It can only simulate them. So when we're thinking about marketing and getting people to empathize, to create something that they will feel or think or embody, we've got to think carefully about how we include this in the creative process. So when it's harnessed well, you can take a very personal story and have it create universal impact. This is one of my favorite adverts from Spain, and I'm sure some of you will be familiar with it. Take a look.
¿Tú crees que lo hemos hecho bien?
Siempre me hace casi llorar, especially the perrito, he's so cute. But that's really done well. Like, it's the feeling of family, going back in time, the people we've loved, the dogs we've lost, and it's universally applicable because we feel the story. Now, what's interesting is you see the different reactions you get when people respond to AI-generated stories and content. This is for the US, but there's a large segment of people, the majority, who say they are either uncomfortable or very uncomfortable with AI-generated content and ads. And so I'd like to ask you quickly here, hands up if you can spot the AI-generated cat. As soon as you think you've spotted it, put your hand up. Okay, hands up if you think this is a trick question, que es una trampa. Es una trampa. So basically, this came out a few years ago, and all of these cats are AI-generated. Now, last year, Getty Images, which has one of the largest portfolios of stock imagery in the world, did a huge study, and they found that 76% of respondents said they couldn't tell if an image was AI-generated or not. Okay, what does that matter? Well, it matters because we're finding that as more people and brands and agencies are creating more AI-generated content, the value of trust of who is doing the posting, not just what is being shared, the value of who is doing it is going up. And that's because we don't trust what we see anymore. Now, trust is one of the most important features of any relationship, whether between parents and their children, between partners, lovers, or indeed brands and their customers. And you see this time again borne out in the psychological research. And what you see it's also doing is impacting the bottom line of companies. So when a customer trusts a brand, they'll be more likely to increase their spending by 25%. 53% will recommend that brand to their friends and family, which, given that there are so many fake reviews, is a really important statistic. And 63% will buy new products, even if it's expensive and costly. Now, when so many brands risk making mistakes, which we all do, or being called out for wrongdoing, if you can earn trust and get some kind of cushioning, when things go wrong, you give yourself a bit of wiggle room. And this is what you find in the research. When customers trust a brand and have earned that trust, 55% will stay loyal, even when that brand does something wrong. So what's interesting in the world of AI and business, as we see in this report that came out earlier this year, is that people have started testing the tools, they've familiarized themselves, and we're starting to see where they can be used well and perhaps not so well. And we're seeing that the enthusiasm for AI has declined, the hype has subsided, skeptical use cases have gone up, so people are using AI more critically, and tech-related fears in wider society, how is this impacting my kids, how is this impacting my business, the content I read, the news that I consume, tech-related societal fears have also gone up. The problem is that we're being told that we increasingly need to rely on AI, and specifically agents, to act on our behalf. But there are some significant problems. Even though we're told that ChatGPT can do these tasks, and that maybe you can create 1,000 fake synthesized people to do your polling research because it's cheaper, what we're finding is that agency has some really significant risks. And agency is different for people than it is for machines. So the root of the word agency, because it's quite interesting to look at, is the kind of idea of being effective or powerful, to be able to act, to set in motion, drive forward. So when I think of an agent, whether it's a person or a machine, it's one who acts, one who has the power to effect change. In the world of psychology, it's quite rich and complex. So if you have greater agency, chances are you have more control in your life. So you're going to feel happier. You have greater autonomy. You feel like you're in the driving seat. You have more capacity for self-directed action. If you feel moved to change your lifestyle, you can do that. You're in charge. You're making the decisions. You can make the choices that are aligned with your values, with your principles. You can regulate your behavior depending on the context, and you can influence the quality of your life depending on how much agency you put into action. So there's a whole bunch of things the agency psychologically can offer. And when we get more of it, we get all of these benefits. Greater well-being, we're more creative, we have greater motivation, más ganas, and we're more likely to achieve the goals that matter to us. On the other hand, in the world of technology, agency means something much more narrow. So it means an agent, which is a system or a program that you then give a task, so the task comes from the outside in, so that it autonomously performs that on the behalf of a user, using its own tools, companion agents, other workflows, and it does it because you're giving it the instructions. The agency doesn't come from within, it comes from an external prompt, which is as it should be, I think. And so AI's agency is limited to tasks, making decisions, problem solving, action execution, and interacting with external environments, if we give it the data that it needs to be able to do those things. But the problem is, just because it's easy means that sometimes we make mistakes and outsource the wrong things. Or we think, well, we have to promote an agent because this is the next frontier, so let's not think about the actual context where we're trying to sell it into. So I don't know how many of you saw this ad, but it's really problematic, and I'll tell you why in a moment. This was for Salesforce, and it came out fairly recently.
The booking app I used didn't have agents, so an AI agent didn't know to move my reservations inside, or know what I like to eat, which is not bad.
What's up, my brother?
Oh, hey, dude!
We really needed this rain.
Right?
Asian Force helps restaurants prevent dining disasters.
Pat all over.
It's what AI was meant to be.
We got you, brother.
All right. When was the last time you went to a restaurant and they seated you outside and gave you food that you didn't order? It doesn't work. Who came up with this idea? You don't need an agent to book you a restaurant in the pouring rain and order you food. It's a terrible idea, and they misjudged it, and they got slammed on social media before it. And so you're also seeing criticisms in research now about the impacts of misuse of AI. So the fact that it might blunt our cognition, reduce our ability to think critically, to outsource things that we shouldn't outsource, or to create a sense of overwhelm that stops us being able to actually distinguish the quality of the output. So there's some significant problems associated with not using AI with discernment. And if we're not careful, we end up in a very uncomfortable situation where we outsource everything to AI agents, our skills, our discernment, creativity, agency, and critical thinking get gobbled up in the process, and we're left thinking, what just happened? So there are ways in which we can use AI wisely. And the first thing I'd like to say here is that it's so important to have a sense of context and how to engage with creativity. So there's a lot of hype when you read the headlines about how AI is going to transform the world of business. And it is, especially in the world of medicine and business. But these headlines are not entirely truthful. So yes, AI can replace human tasks, but they're problematic. When we see that the whole engineering workforce will have to upskill in the next 2 years, we're not talking about some of the problems with fabrication. And when people like Zuckerberg, who has vested interests in people believing the hype so the stocks go up, when he says we're going to replace all of our engineers by X time, you've got to think skeptically. And the question is really can AI do all of these things? Really are we at risk in these specific ways? So I tried ChatGPT last week. I prompted it with this. I asked it to write out the word ridiculous and circle all the vowels. I did this on stage with someone recently, called someone up. They did it within about 10 seconds. Quick, they got it right. This is what ChatGPT gave me. It doesn't even spell the word ridiculous, and there are no vowels circled because it doesn't understand the concept. There's no symbolic understanding in AI. Then I asked it this: create an image of a clock showing that the time is 3:20. You can go analog, you can go digital, but it didn't do either. That's either 10 past 10 or 10 to 2. You can't tell because it can't do it. And so there are some significant drawbacks when using AI that we have to be aware of so we can use it in the best way possible. And that's because LLMs are limited. They work on abstractions, they're statistical models, and in reality, humans exist in very complex contexts. And there are 3 that I'd like to name briefly here. The first is cultural. Cultural contexts are complicated, they are rich, they are dynamic, and they are nuanced. How many of you saw this when it came out a while ago, all the different AI Barbies? This is a huge scandal in the UK. And a lot of people were very angry at the biases and stereotypes that were expressed through these AI-generated Barbies, and that people hadn't had the consciousness to say, well, maybe this is offensive, maybe let's quality control that. Interestingly, large language models, even if you try to adjust them, tend to express the ideology of their makers. And when you look at Western LLMs versus non-Western LLMs, there are distinct preferences in terms of what they favor. Now, there's an amazing cultural psychologist called Geert Hofstede from the Netherlands who looks at kind of personality traits for cultures. And here you have some really clear bars of the differences between Spain and the US. And yet most of us are using American LLMs when looking to do research or help us with our work. And so what ideologies are baked into the LLMs that we're using without being critical about how they're impacting the output? So the second context is embodied, which we saw earlier with somatic, physical, emotion, and empathy. And we know what a hand looks like because we all have them. Most of us have them. This can only approximate what a hand looks like. Or if you say to an AI, create an image of people doing yoga, it doesn't understand the principle of having a body. Or someone doing handstands. Like there's piernas por todos lados. It's just a total nightmare. Or here, girls with roller skates. It conceptually doesn't get it, right? It just puts the next most probable pixel into place, and you end up with a horror show. And so it's also problematic when it comes to imaging the stereotypes that exist in our world. So if you say to someone, okay, think about someone playing soccer, you or I might have a wider diversity of people we might imagine, but AI goes for blokes. If you say someone doing cleaning, AI will go for women, and so on. If you're thinking about attractive people, very young, pale skin, small noses. And these fake images not only show us what our stereotypes are, but also what happens when they are exacerbated or made worse when put through these sorts of platforms. So the third and final context is temporal, and it's about how we exist in time. So AI and humans operate on different time horizons. AI uses historic data. We also use historic data, but we dream into the future. And so where AI is derivative, it takes all of the things that have been, that have worked, and collapses possibilities into a probable outcome that you'll like. Think things like Spotify or Netflix recommendation engines. It will give you more of the same, so it reduces potentially the scope of what comes out. That can lead to prediction fatigue. Oh, I already know this music. I know this type of show. I want something different, because humans also need to grow and evolve. And so while AI looks into the past to collapse possible futures into that which is probable, humans exist dreaming into the future at the emergent edges of new things, novelty, imagination, innovation. Something that doesn't exist yet. We can bring these things into being because we have that capacity. And Marshall McLuhan, several years ago, talked about the ways in which the media is the message, and how new media, and I would suggest AI and generative AI forms part of that ecosystem, new media create art forms which then impose on us the ways in which we perceive the world. So if you go onto LinkedIn, which I do quite a bit, I can tell now very quickly if the person I'm following has generated something with AI and it feels flat, and it's got the same structure, and it lacks soul, versus someone who's actually thought about the idea, created it, crafted it, and then shared it with the world. And so this is why content that goes against our expectations is so persuasive, especially in the world of advertising and marketing. This example, so all-you-can-eat rest stop that's placed in a physical location you might not expect. Or this one, supersizing household pens that you would have, or office pens, so that you interact with it in a different way. Or Tipex, there's a sense of play, and it's not expected. Or this one, a trompe l'oeil, where you see the image fade into the sky. Or this example, where we know what the advert means because it's written and created, embedded into the structure of the advert. Or knowing how to use your environment to make a point simply and effectively, like this. All of this, someone or a team of someones, of people, of humans, came up with ideas to think, what's familiar? What's novel? How do we marry this and create something that's going to capture people's attention? Now, you may have seen headlines like this, that people prefer AI-generated art and Shakespeare, and yet when you dig into the research and these lines are quite hyped up, you'll see that it's because these things are digestible. They're easy. And when you're in a place where there's so much information coming in, you want to read the Shakespeare that's easy to digest. But then we lose something. When you look at sales, this is a fascinating study that found when people do their own sales pitch and they get that cadence of emotional connection right, it's much more persuasive, and the brand salience and memorability for that brand goes up as compared to when an AI has created and delivered that sales pitch. We know when it comes to art that even if we can't tell the difference explicitly, if I can't say, oh, I think this is AI and this is human, even if we can't speak it, when attached to brain scans, we know that people prefer, intuitively, human art, and there's a positive emotional response to it. Now, the flip side of this is that we're starting to see what's known as the AI authorship effect. If you are going to use AI for emotional messages, people will often experience moral disgust. And if you're careful about your brand, you don't want them feeling that sense of disgust because they're not going to want to buy from you. And yet, if you use the AI to help field queries, use it in chatbots to resolve issues, or to return facts to the customer, then it's rated really positively. So it's about the use case. And so this is about the impact of AI. When you use it wrong to create emotional messages, it can negatively impact the perception and sensation around the brand, and it can damage your profits, your bottom line. So how can we use AI more skillfully? So to embed it in a way that's going to help the long-term success of your brand and to increase its efficiency without gutting its soul. Well, this is where we have to think about playing for the future and the longer term. Many of us have this fear of missing out. So I've got to deploy it now. I'm going to use Claude or ChatGPT or DeepSeek or Suno, whatever it is. I'm going to use it now, deploy now and think later. And when brands have done that, it's a race to the bottom, and the damage to the reputation is swift. And so you don't want to be in a situation where you're being led by the technology for technology's sake. Instead, you can take an alternative approach. You can think, okay, what kind of world do we want to live in? What kind of experience do we want our customers to have? How do we want them to feel when they're talking about our brand, buying from us, telling their friends about what they experienced when they bought that thing in that store that one time, and hopefully they become repeat customers? Start from there, and then use the technology in alignment with your brand's values, with the intentions you have for your customers, also prioritizing their safety and the relationship that you've worked hard to earn. And so I wanted to leave you with a few tips, tactical tips, on how to use Gen AI to augment your capacities in a way that I've road tested, and so have many other people in the industry. So the first is work in your domain expertise area. If you know what is good quality and poor quality, you can verify the output. How useful is it? How reliable? How valuable? Prompt it for variance and quantity. Put yourself in the position of editor, of curator. If you've got a great idea, say, take this idea, role play that you're all these different people, tell me what you would feel in response to this. Give me some suggestions. Note-taking. I was talking with a CMO of a really large finance company a few weeks ago. She went away on a holiday, and after 1 week, she'd gotten all of the meetings transcribed with the consent of the people in the meeting, and had distilled the key points into an A4 sheet that she could easily read when she got back. Amazing use case for AI. Distillation. If you've got loads of data around your customer behavior and you want to create something which is digestible to send to your marketing team, summarize and restructure that data using AI. It's really efficient, only where the downside of the errors is low. And finally, translating content. I sometimes use this to translate my English into Spanish, if there's a word I'm missing, or into Catalan. But you can also use it for things like contracts. If I go to the doctor and there's an informed consent form that's all legalese, I need to be able to understand it in everyday language, and you can use it for that too. So whenever we're making choices about technology, how we use AI, what we're using it for, and how it's impacting others, because you're in strong positions where you will impact the future of your industry, that also carries with it great responsibility. We need to make sure that we're using these tools in a beneficial way that's going to uphold the resilience and success of your business, of our communities, and also the global interconnected web of life. So to close, we've covered quite a lot. We did the performance and projection with Eliza, the 3 kinds of empathy, cognitive, emotional, and physical. We talked about trust, authenticity, the AI authorship effect of emotional content and that sense of moral disgust. We talked about the difference between human and technological agency, being careful to outsource. I've missed one. We talked about context and creativity. And we talked about rethinking our incentives and goals in how we use technology wisely. If you want to find out more, you are very, very welcome. You can QR code this. And if you would like to improve your English and learn some amazing insights from the world of AI, I've listed some fantastic resources that I use, best podcasts, newsletters, shows. There's also sort of resources in there for people that I think are worth following in the world of AI. Thank you very much for your attention. Muchísimas gracias y que vaya muy bien. Gracias a todos.